wanted to show off one of the new features within Blockade. The Blockade node that actually runs publicly is hosted in Amazon Web Services using a serverless infrastructure. One of the recent updates that we've made is the ability for anyone to deploy their own version of one of our cloud nodes using an AWS set of scripts. And so what essentially gets created automatically for you, the user, is all of this infrastructure here. And so we have IAM users, policies that get deployed, an API gateway that's then hooked up to several different Lambda functions, some of which will be using S3, other which will be using DynamoDB, and then all of the services themselves kind of deploy their logs into CloudWatch. So here's the code. It's a simple command line utility that is essentially packed over with the analyst toolbench. And let's just go through a quick demonstration of using it. So like I said, it's with the analyst toolbench. And so if I just tab out, I can see a couple different Blockade utilities here. We're going to use the AWS deploy. And this takes a couple different options. We're going to be doing a setup, and then we're going to specify a region of US West 1 and set the debug flag. And so once I'm actually kicked this off, we're going to see a whole lot of output where we're essentially scripting all of the creation of that graph that you essentially just saw before directly into my Amazon account. And in order for this to work, all you need is just an AWS account to be set up, and then a credit card configured, though this will run on the free tier. Once all the infrastructure has actually been deployed, we'll get a nice little prompt at the end that lets us set up an admin, an admin user for the node that we're deploying. So I'm going to set up myself inside of this. And then it's going to use the API and automatically configure that so that we now have a user, an API key, and then here is the actual cloud node itself. And so what we have here is a nice little convenient copy-paste script that I can now paste into my terminal, and I can now start interacting through the analyst workbench directly with this cloud node. So for instance, if I wanted to say, let's say add an IOC, we're only going to add a single IOC. Let's grab something from one of the recent reporting that came out on espionage threat called Ocean Lotus. So I'm going to essentially submit that to our cloud node. I'm going to get some confirmation here that we have one request that's been written. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this information, the Blockade server. We're going to go over to our Blockade extension. I'm going to punch that in. And even though this information is optional, we're going to include this anyway. So I'm going to include my name, API key, that. So now we have that. We're going to save. The configuration's now been saved. And essentially what's happening here is we've now added this new cloud node directly to our configuration. And Blockade will go and essentially grab anything from this, any indicators. And so we put this particular indicator in. And so let's try to get to it now. And perfect. So we can see here that Blockades actually went and did what it was supposed to do. It's blocked access to this particular domain. And what's included here as well is a lot of raw details. And so not only are we blocking, but we're also sending information back over to our Blockade cloud node as well. If I go back to our Blockade extension, we can actually get that information back out. And so we can see here that we had a nice little format, my source IP address, the date and time, the indicator, and then all of the additional details that are present within the system. And so, as you saw, pretty simple to set up, nothing too complex. And what's nice here is, if we just go into our Amazon console, we can see the actual gateway itself. So we have our Blockade API here. You can see all the methods that get set up automatically. And then like the Lambda functions themselves. All of this just gets set up for you. What's nice about this is that runs on the free tier. You don't have to worry about really maintaining it. There's no actual server. Everything's executed at a point in time. And assuming that you were kind of done with this and that, you wanted to run the experiment's over, you can actually just go through a teardown process. We're going to specify our region again. And what that's going to do is actually going to delete every single thing that we just did and completely remove it all from AWS. And you can see here, happens basically less than 5 seconds or 10 seconds. And we're back to a clean slate where all of the functions and everything else is essentially gone. So pretty cool. Makes it a lot easier to manage Blockade, makes it certainly a lot easier to deploy different cloud nodes or services for individual groups in certain regions, especially where Amazon has coverage.